Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Derman Ventures. Now, before we get started, I just want to say that this is the final episode of 2025, and it's been an incredible year. I'm genuinely grateful to each and every one of you who've listened, shared an episode, or even reached out along the way. Thank you all so much for joining me on this amazing ride, and we've got some really exciting conversations coming in 2026, so stay tuned. There's a lot more ahead. Now, to wrap up the year, today I'm joined by Adam Rossi, a Virginia Tech alum, serial entrepreneur, mentor, and investor who's built companies from the ground up, successfully exited along the way, and has built several amazing stories to share. Adam's journey spans everything from founding and scaling companies to mentoring and investing in the next generation of founders. In this episode, we talk about what entrepreneurship actually looks like beyond the highlight reels, right? Adam breaks down common misconceptions students have about startups and entrepreneurial life, the mistakes he personally made early on, and the lessons that really only come from building something in the real world. We also discuss how students can start developing real skills and confidence early, even before launching a company or landing their first role. So, if you're a student curious about startups, figuring out your path, or wondering how to get started from where you are right now, this conversation is full of some amazing insight and perspective. All right, let's get straight into the episode. Hope you all enjoy. Well, Adam, thank you so much for hopping on Dormer Ventures. I'm really excited for this episode. I'm really excited to hear some of your great insights, especially for our listeners. Thank you so much once again for being on the show.
Yeah, let's do it, Zaki.
Awesome. So before we hop into things, I want to hear about yourself. Where did you start? What does your journey look like? Where are you now? Tell us about, just the whole Adam Rossi experience.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is I was a kid that always wanted to start a company, and I didn't know what it would do or be, but I would just, practice logos and trademarks, and I would tell people, that I wanted to be a business owner, and I thought, it would be in science or engineering. I went to Virginia Tech for engineering. Really got into software and started to write computer programs for structural engineers. The first computer program I wrote was for designing a concrete steel reinforced retaining wall, and real engineers started using it. And I said, okay, I'm gonna make a software company. I'm gonna found a software company when I graduate and get a couple years experience. And so that's what I did. It ended up being a very different kind of company. Like a lot of things, they don't end up the way you think they will. It was a company that wrote a lot of software for law enforcement, intelligence agencies, things like code breaking, image analysis, evidence collection systems, really niche-y stuff. So that's what the company became. And in 2010, I sold it to a defense contractor that is now General Dynamics. Went through a bunch of changes.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you mentioned something there where you talked about how this has really been planted as a seed since your childhood. Would you say that to have the leg up in the entrepreneurial world, you have to have that seed planted from childhood to maybe not want to work for someone else or want to always have a passion in building something? Or do you think that can just be built over time?
I think I've seen people late in life found amazingly successful companies. And, I'm talking 50s, 60s. So I don't think it has to be a driving force from when you're a little kid like it was for me. I think you can find it at any point in life. One thing I will say, because, a lot of young folks who are interested in entrepreneurship will ask me, and I try to be very realistic and honest with them and say, it's not for everyone. The amount of work, the amount of sacrifice, you're working every weekend while your friends are having fun, you're cleaning the bathroom. I mean, you've got to be willing to really work hard. And so I think so long as you have that in you, that driving force and desire to do it and not get kind of shaken off the Bronco, you can come to it any point in life.
And what have those sacrifices looked like personally for you in your journey as an entrepreneur?
I wasn't able to I tried to go to the bank and borrow money or get a line of credit when I first started the company. I was 24. I didn't have any credit history. I met my wife at Virginia Tech. We got married right as we graduated. We moved to Northern Virginia, and so we both had student debt, and we couldn't qualify for any sort of loan. And so we worked for 2 years and just saved every penny while paying off our loans, while driving our piece of junk cars, while living in the crummiest apartment, you could find in Fairfax County. And it's hard because, your friends are leasing the BMW. They're right. I mean, they've got a good job. They're living large. And that didn't end for a decade, right? Where you feel like you're behind your peers. Your peers have all this money that they can go to nice restaurants with, and you're eating a sandwich at home and saving your money, right? And so it's a sacrifice. And then things got really scary when we had our first employees, and we'd struggle to make payroll, and use credit cards and go into personal debt, right? So it goes from saving all your money for a long time to going negative, right? And so, and then it's just, I think, the emotional and physical toll of sacrifice in that, there's a lot of stress when you start a company. And I mean, for me, I would get weird kind of physical problems, or even though I was young, I got shingles at like a really young age, right? It's like, I had this like thing on my face. I was like, what is this? And I took a picture and sent it to my doctor, and she's like, I think it's shingles, but you're too young, and she's like, are you under a lot of stress? It's like, yeah, I'm definitely under a lot of stress. So I think the sacrifice is, you oftentimes sacrifice your health. You eat poorly, you don't exercise, you work 20 hours. So I mean, it's physical, mental, and financial sacrifice is how I would classify it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really reminds me of this idea of how skewed the idea of entrepreneurship can be, especially for the younger generation, especially students that are in college right now. I mean, you look at it, whether you're looking at watching specific movies or looking on social media, it's so glamorized, right? It goes straight from someone having an idea to someone driving the nicest car in the neighborhood, and it just cuts out everything in between. Do you personally think this is a misconception that's plaguing new founders?
I think it's one of the worst aspects of social media right now. Is it's not only glamorizing startups and entrepreneurship. It's bigger than that. It's showing young people. It's all these young people who have the Lambo, who are, and this stuff's all rented, right? But they've rented a Lambo, they've rented an Airbnb, and it makes it look like they own a fabulous mansion. And they're putting screenshots of either they're an investor and they have these crazy, portfolio performance, or they claim they're, an e-commerce seller and they're making millions of dollars. And for one, I think most of it is not true. It's fake it till you make it, right? That kind of culture of like, I need to project success to get other people to believe I'm successful. And so if you've got a bunch of people putting out a bunch of fake stuff like that, it makes you feel like, what's wrong with me? Why am I struggling at a regular job and saving money and it's taking so long? Or why is my portfolio only up, 20% when people are up 2,000%, right? I mean, just totally unrealistic expectations. And I think people then will get tricked into saying, well, I'm going to acquire a business, or I'm going to start a business. And they have this expectation that you're going to be making a lot of money, and they're undercapitalized. And so I've seen so many good companies with good business models, and they get crushed by cash flow, right? Where it's just like, look, I've got a backlog 6 months out, but I can't make my payroll this week. Like I can't borrow any more money from anyone. I can't, right? I can't get a loan. Cash crunch will kill you. And so, you've got this people going in thinking that it's an easy path and probably not saving enough money when they start or not having enough runway. And then the reality sets in. So yeah, I think look, there's a bunch of things I don't like about social media.
Yeah.
And I've got 3 young kids, and I worry about what they absorb on that platform, because I think it's a bunch of bad habits. I think it's totally unrealistic. It makes everyone look like they have a great life in general, but from a financial perspective and a business performance perspective, I don't trust anyone that's selling courses, right? And there's a lot of that content I think is designed to sell you something in the end, and then you just get ripped off by them, right? They're doing it to extract money from you, and you always have to question, like, if you're so successful, why are you selling me a course?
No, exactly, exactly. I remember when I was younger, I was really into that course thing. And the moment I realized there was really a problem is because there was a specific business model that was really big at the time. It was like social media marketing, and it was creating your own agency. And there are people selling courses on it. And there was one really successful individual in the space who was selling courses on social media marketing, yet he had sold his agency for social media marketing 5 years back. So
Hmm.
it's more of watching what they do, not what they say. Because if you're not
Exactly right.
selling a course, you're not even doing it. Why are you advertising it to others? So it's really
For sure.
interesting. And would you say beyond that, there are some really key misconceptions in the startup space that maybe you had made going into things, or maybe you're seeing in the startup space, given that you spend a lot of time mentoring students and kind of overwatching that entire space?
I think I kind of go back and forth on this. On the one hand, I think there's so much opportunity for anyone who is willing to put in honest work, show up, do what you say you're going to do. Um, the bar for most services now are so low that if you're just, a little more reliable, a little more efficient, right, you can do well in business. And I think the idea that you need to come up with this killer new app, or fundamentally, like, we're going to redesign the way you buy groceries, right? I mean, like, those are cool to think about, and every once in a while somebody knocks a major home run. But a lot of times I'm like, look, I want to hear something stupidly boring, right? Like, those are the things that usually work. Like, at Apex, we talk to people who are like, my company cleans pools. It's like, great. I know there's a market for that. It's a proven idea. Can you perform a little better than the average pool cleaner? You're probably going to do okay. Like, that's great. It's, yeah. So I think the issue is looking for the sexy, cool, new, groundbreaking idea. And that puts a lot of pressure on people. They raise a lot of money, and most of those ideas aren't going to work out. Statistically, most new businesses don't work out. But, if somebody says, I invested in a company, Lawn Starter, that were 2 guys coming out of college. And they were like, look, we mow lawns now over in Tidewater. We're going to create a software app that just makes it easier to get your lawn mowed. And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, that's not, it's not groundbreaking, but everybody needs, most homeowners need outdoor services, lawn services. And if you guys can do it a little better, a little faster, a little smoother, like, you're going to do well. And I just got the update today. They're absolutely crushing it.
That's fantastic. And would you say in that case, given that background, that unbeknownst to most new founders who often think that seeing competition right out the gate is a bad sign, would you say that competition is actually a green flag in this space?
Absolutely. That's a major misconception. People will be like, oh, the space is too crowded. Like, we shouldn't do that. Yeah, there's a reason it's crowded. It's because a lot of people need that product or service, and that's good. I mean, the scary thing is, and I hear it all the time, people will pitch me on an idea and they'll say, and there's no competition. It's like, well, is that because there's no market? Because you got to now prove to me that first there's a market, and then that your product is the right one for the market. That's a harder sell than, going back to someone and saying, I want to do gutter cleaning. It's like, okay, I get my gutters cleaned. Leaves fall in the gutters and someone has to go up there and it's dangerous and I don't want to do it and I pay for it. Like, I know there's a market for that. Like, now that it's a much easier sell. Like, just tell me how you're going to do that, you know?
Definitely. And when it comes to that, I want to hear a little bit more about your idea of what it takes a founder to continue going. We were talking previously about this, about, how hard the road can get. And you always hear things, and this kind of ties back additionally to our conversation about social media, right? Everyone's talking about motivation. You have motivational videos that you watch on social media. Everyone's talking about how you always need motivation. Where is the line drawn, specifically drawing from your experience, between motivation and just doing it when you don't feel like it, just having that discipline?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't feel like going to the gym this morning and I went, right? I go every morning and, that's discipline, in the long term, it's good for you. The hard thing in business is, if you're working in a business that isn't making money, and the question is like, how much further can I go? Right. I mean, is this the right idea? Should I change this idea? Should I keep battling? And I mean, there's crazy stories out there, right? I mean, the FedEx founder, was out of money and went to Vegas and put the remaining money down on blackjack or whatever and won and kept the company going. Or the GoDaddy, founder was out of money and said, let's just spend our last $1 million on a Super Bowl ad. And everybody said, you're crazy. And it worked, right? I mean, the company went crazy with one Super Bowl ad. So, I mean, there's all these stories like that where it's like they were this close to giving up and they went a little further. But, there's plenty of other stories where, someone says, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried this and it didn't work. I folded this company up. I liquidated it. And then on my third one, like, created this giant company that you've heard of now, right? I have huge respect for those people because what they did is much harder than what I did. I mean, I was lucky in that my first business eventually became successful. Psychologically, if it had been a failure, you feel humiliated, right? You tell your friends and family, I'm doing this, I'm pouring my heart and soul into this, and it doesn't work. And now you have to tell them it was a failure. And you're going to, now maybe go and try something else. That to me is those are unique individuals that can do that. And it must take a lot of belief in themselves that, hey, there's something in me. I need to do this. I want to keep trying to do this. I think I like a lot of that motivational content online. I do feel like sometimes it gets folks into trouble in that they have just, for whatever reason, tried a business that the macro headwinds are against them somehow, right? It was either the wrong product or the right time, wrong timing, the wrong geographical location, and they beat their head against the wall, and then, finally it fails. I think some of that motivational content can actually work against you. It's like, look, that was kind of obvious 3 years ago that you probably weren't in the right segment there and you should have tried something different.
And so in that case, when it comes to failure, and I'm very familiar with this, just like you said, I mean, I would, especially in my early years of college, I talked to everyone about what I'm working on, bragged about it, made it seem like the biggest idea. And then when it didn't end up working, it was just a very hard conversation to have. For example, I mean, I had it on my resume previously, and whenever recruiters would ask me, oh, you ended up, not working on that venture anymore, what happened? And I had to just talk to my own recruiter that I'm trying to get a job for, tell them that I failed. And so how would you recommend founders perceive the idea of failure? And how do you recommend they go into something new after it? Because the worst mistake you can make is not learning from your mistakes, right?
Yeah. No, I think I love seeing a founder, with something on their resume and they say this, and they're open about it. Like, this was a thing I pursued and it was a failure for these reasons. I think people that can be honest about it and not be, not try to sugarcoat it and spin it and say, oh, I divested that bit, right? Just like, I think that I don't like hearing that because it means like either the person A didn't really learn from it or B is not honest. But I think it's totally refreshing if someone just owns it, right? Just says, oh, yeah, I did this. Total failure, you know? I mean, I frequently talk about an acquisition I had that was an absolute disaster. And I should have known there were red flags, and I talked myself out of them, and I lost $4 million on an acquisition that was pretty obvious to anyone that like there was a major problem with it, and I did it anyways, right? And just like boom, $4 million, vaporized, right? It leaves a mark. But it's one of those things where everybody has those things in their life. It might not be in business, but it might be something personal, right? Where you just have like you make a mistake, right? And to your point, if you can learn from it and grow from it, I don't think it's bad at all. And I love when people are open and honest about it, because it helps other people say, oh yeah, I was feeling really embarrassed about that. I'm glad you admitted to that. Now I can admit to, having something that was similar to that. It's like we should just be honest about it with each other. And I think the main thing though is it's not even like a bankruptcy or a financial failure. What we really fear is being embarrassed with our friends and family, right? Like that's the main thing that we fear. And so for me, when I started my company, I was like, I don't care if I go bankrupt. I don't care if my credit is destroyed, but man, it's going to be so humiliating to tell people that, that thing I was slaving away on didn't work, and when you think about, you put so much into what they think, and at the end of the day, they don't care. They're just like, hey, we still love you, like, yeah, it didn't work, but like, what does it matter, right? It's almost like self-imposed, and or even, when I've invested in a company, right, and a startup fails, it happens, right? I mean, most will. And the founder's really embarrassed to admit to it, to even say, we're not operating anymore. And when they tell me, I'm just like, hey, I think you gave it a really good try. And they're kind of like, oh, I thought you'd be mad. It's like, no, I'm not mad. You honestly worked your butt off and it didn't work. It's okay, And I think they've built that conversation up in their head. And then when they have the conversation, it's like, oh, this wasn't bad at all.
Right. In that case, would you recommend that founders, especially in early stage, are more selective about who they share their current ventures with?
No, I don't think so. I think you should have as many conversation as you can and have as much networking as you can, because you just never know what door opens up. I mean, it could be someone in the airport lobby that turns into your greatest customer, right? It could be, I mean, and so because you never know, you need to cast a pretty wide net. I mean, some people are very, very concerned about intellectual property and are you going to steal my idea? And I don't want to talk about, right? I've never seen that happen, to tell you the truth. People are always like, I want to talk to you about my startup, but you have to sign this NDA and it's like, okay, but it's generally doesn't happen that people steal your idea. So you should just talk about it,
Yeah, I was listening to this podcast, and this gentleman was talking about how you can really tell who's a beginner founder versus an experienced founder, because the experienced founders, they'll just tell you their idea, while beginners founders, they'll make sure to, keep it quiet or tell you to sign an NDA. But at the end of the day, there's so much work involved in actually making an idea, no matter how good, successful, that just telling them the idea alone isn't going to make your value of your startup worthless and give them all the credit, right?
It's exactly right. I mean, ideas themselves are totally valueless, right? And execution is so rare and hard to do. It's kind of like, if you said, I'm going to play Michael Jordan in his prime, but, you're going to get the Bulls offensive playbook and defensive playbook, and you're going to get to study it, right? It's like, well, that's not going to do me any good. I mean, like, I still need to compete him, which means I have to practice like crazy and have natural gifts. And I'm not going to win, right? It doesn't matter that I've got his secrets. I mean, he's still going to out execute.
Definitely. And I want to tap a little bit into that, the idea of execution. would you say, in your experience, have you made any mistakes in regards to execution that you think could just be avoidable that you'd
Yeah.
recommend? Go
Yeah. I
ahead.
mean, I'll tell you the main mistake that I had was I spent way too much time early on being kind of a control freak. And I would, I first wrote all the software for the company myself. And I love writing software. I was very prolific and I was kind of a tyrant. When I started to hire, more employees, I would micromanage them, right? I'd go look at their screen and be like, that's wrong. Like, just move over. I'd take the keyboard over, like, do something different. They would check stuff in and leave for the night, and I would go into the repository and just change it all, and you can't really keep, uh, uh, you can't really, you can't run a company that way. I mean, so the issue is you only have 20 hours a day you can work, and that's stretching it. And, the company will never scale if you're doing that. And it scares away the best employees, right? Or it lets them never achieve the potential that they could achieve. So there were a number of reasons why I cost the company a couple years of good growth during a fabulous time in the market. I mean, this is during the dot-com heyday, right? Like I should have been growing like this, and instead we're doing nothing because I was like, I was way too authoritarian and opinionated and hands-on and so yeah, I constrained the company for years. I that was poor execution. I think we're also capital constrained. I mentioned that we just never really were. I never understood finance or debt or how to fundraise or any of that stuff. And so even when we started getting really successful, I just had an account over at SunTrust and I had this tiny line of credit with them. It was like a local bank branch. And we had millions of dollars, and I still was like, I barely had any credit facility. And there was a time when I had the opportunity to acquire this complementary business from a founder who had to divest it for kind of regulatory issues, right? So he had one thing and he had to divest this other thing. It was, and I knew this was a great company. And he's like, look, I'm going to do you a favor here because I want my employees to work for you. I'm going to sell it to you at this price. It's a very attractive price. And it was. And I asked my COO, how can we raise that much money? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I think I could come up with maybe $300K. This is like $50 million, right? That we needed. And I was like, I think I could probably come up with, like 2 million, like from the company's accounts. But I didn't even know who to talk to. And so I went back and I told him, we can't come up with the money. He's like, are you sure? I said, yeah. We had no, we weren't financially savvy. Today I would know a bunch of people that I would call and just say, hey, we need to raise some debt or, or look, all right. I mean, it would be a straightforward acquisition. Just didn't know. And so that was another thing that cost us, a lot of, I mean, let's put it this way. The people that did buy that company, I think eventually sold that same unit for $350 million. So it was a pretty good investment for someone, but not me,
Wow. What would you say that taught you about managing finances in a startup that you would want to share with college founders that they can use throughout their journey?
Yeah, I think in that case, I really should have talked to folks who knew more about the subject. I didn't, right? I really was just, I was not aware of how these things worked, and I didn't even know who to talk to about it. And I wasn't very good in terms of networking outside of my space. So I knew a bunch of people in the software industry. I didn't know anyone really in the finance industry. I would just say for founders, you need to understand, what your options are. Talk to people in the finance industry. Be very, very cautious about having, when times are good, try to establish a large credit facility, like a line of credit that will, allow you to weather storms. I mean, I always say, watch cash flow. Don't get in over your skis. Make sure you plan for a rainy day. All these things that are that I've just seen hurt businesses. Value money. Don't ever. When it comes, I've seen startup people think they need to buy fancy, office equipment and have a nice, marquee office and Class A office space, and those things are not needed. And when I'm investing, I don't want to see that type of behavior. I want to see a person that's very financially disciplined, but when there's an opportunity, I want to see them act quickly, like that opportunity that I had, and decisively, and kind of use leverage when they need to.
Definitely. So, Adam, you've given some absolutely amazing insights that a lot of our listeners as college founders can equip in their toolbox. And as we close off, one thing that I would love to touch on is really at the nexus of all of this, the kind of seeding point that can lead to all of this great success to fruition, which is networking, right? It really starts at people. Network is your net worth, as they say. What insights would you personally feel are valuable to share to the younger generation about networking, especially people like college students who haven't particularly built a large network yet?
Yeah, I'm really opinionated on this. So
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
yeah. So one, I think a lot of college students say, LinkedIn is for old people and it's, LinkedIn sucks, right? I mean, they just don't have a high opinion of it. It's a necessary tool in the professional world, and a college student should be developing, a LinkedIn profile, right? That's really your resume now. They should be trying to develop a network within LinkedIn, which is your digital network of, friends and family is usually where it starts, and other students, and then their father or mother, right? I mean, you just you go from there. But the main thing is a lot of younger people, because, your generation has grown up with a lot of texts and DMs and not as much face-to-face interaction. I say, work on your digital resume. Be very cautious about what you're putting out there in terms of bad content on social media, because everything is kind of part of your digital resume. And I think AI tools, as they get better, they're going to scrape all that and make kind of a dossier on you digitally. And so, be very mindful of what you're publishing. And then in the real world, I know people feel shy. I think they're, because of COVID and because of the way a lot of the digital kind of life has went for younger people are very shy about face-to-face meetings and interactions, or even just voice calls. And what I would say is, you want to get over that. I'm an introvert, right? I'm not the life of the party by nature. I'm not somebody that's just walking around making friends everywhere I go. So I have to force myself to do. So this is advice for me too. But, when people are like a founder or even just a job seeker, right? I always say, like, look, your competition isn't going to your local chamber of commerce and walking around and introducing yourself, right? And shaking hands. Your competition isn't knocking on the door of a potential customer or a potential employer and saying, hey, I know you're not hiring, but I followed you. I wondered if I could, pitch you on this idea or present this to you, right? I mean, I think physically showing up to network is really important. Face-to-face introductions, networking, shaking hands, looking someone in the eyes, and just being very mindful of let me say this. Have you ever been in a situation where you're talking to someone and you can tell that they don't think you're important enough to really give you the attention? So they're kind of like looking around like, who else should I be talking, right? And I hate that.
Yeah.
I despise that type of behavior. And what I think, people should keep in mind is, you never know where the world is going to take you and where one introduction is going to, potentially lead to. And so I think you really, when you're young, have to be mindful of introducing yourself, trying to learn a lot about the other person you're talking to, staying in touch with folks. It's really easy to have a one-off and then go away. And that's the other thing I like about LinkedIn is you talk to someone and you say, hey, this was really a great chatting with you. Are you on LinkedIn? Yeah, I am. Okay, I'm going to send you a connection. So at least you have some way to get back in touch with them, and you maintain that connection kind of digitally. Anyways, I would say, I would say be brave too, right? So I think like college students, for example, or recent grads, I think you'd be shocked at the number of people who will give you amazing amounts of their time, resources, encouragement, their network, all these things if you just ask, right? And so a lot of people say, well, I'm not important enough. That's the CEO of whatever. He's not going to, or she's not going to be interested in talking to me. And you talk yourself out of it, right? So you just don't even try. And I generally feel like if someone that is young and interested in something reaches out to someone who's more established, they generally have an obligation to be responsive. A lot of times they're busy, and so it takes a lot of, follow-ups like, hey, I know you're busy. You might have missed, can I drop by your office, right? I mean, whatever it is, but persistent, but eventually, like you'd be shocked at, the stories that you'll see of people that are, like Steve Jobs meeting the CEO of Hewlett Packard, right? When he was a high school student, he just called him from the phone book, right? Like those are true stories. Like that happens all the time. So I would just say be brave, right? Network in a very fearless way. And don't get discouraged when people brush you off. Just keep going,
Right. Keep going and be brave to all of our listeners. There have been times where like you said, I've talked myself out of some amazing opportunities that, could have taken me a lot of places. So that's a really, really deep and great source of insight. Adam, thank you so much once again. This has been some amazing insight, especially to our listeners. This has been a long-awaited episode, so I really appreciate your time here to share all of your experiences, the past mistakes you've made, some of your incredible insights. I know it's going to go a long way for our listeners. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for doing this, Zaki.
Of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. That's it for my conversation with Adam. And before we close out, per usual, I want to leave you all with a few key takeaways. First, Adam emphasizes the importance of discipline. Entrepreneurship is a challenging path, and setbacks are honestly inevitable. However, as Adam points out, failure is not something to be embarrassed about. It's a valuable experience that can fuel your growth and resilience. Don't be quiet about failure. Secondly, Adam highlights the necessity of networking beyond your immediate industry. Whether you're in software or any other field, building connections with professionals in finance and other sectors is crucial. Adam's own experiences, as he mentioned, underscore how a lack of financial networking can pose significant challenges in managing a startup's finances. Lastly, financial discipline is paramount. But, as Adam advises, when an opportunity arises, be ready to act swiftly. Balancing caution with decisiveness can make all the difference in seizing the right moment to propel your venture forward. All right, that's all for today's episode. I want to say thank you again to everyone who's tuned in this year. Whether you've been here since the beginning or just found the show recently, your support truly means a lot, and it's what makes conversations like these possible. We've got some exciting episodes and new voices coming in 2026, so make sure to stay tuned. All right, that's it for 2025. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks for being a part of Dorman Ventures, and I'll see you all next year.